But what I think the story has to teach us, through all its twists and turns, through all its intricacies, are those three character traits that we see in the three main characters. Because sometimes in this story, we might recognize ourselves in Sarah, who has lots of other traits in different stories in the Bible, but in this one, what keeps coming up is her jealousy. And sometimes we feel jealous. Sometimes we feel like we want to control that emotion in ourselves, but it's hard to. And we act out of that jealous place. And so I think in the story of Hagar, we see a caution when we recognize in ourselves that jealousy that rises up in Sarah, to take a breath, to step back, to redirect ourselves. And then we see in Abraham, a good and faithful man, many wonderful traits, but we see in this story that he is largely ineffective at standing up for Hagar. He's part of plans that get put in action. He agrees to them, but then when there's pushback from Sarah, he wants to preserve peace in his household, and so he doesn't stand up for Hagar, but instead casts her out or suggests that she be cast out. And I think in this story, we see in ourselves the times where we falter. We're not as effective as we could be. We're not as strong in voice as we might want to be. Or maybe we see someone who is being bullied, picked on, or we hear a joke that's racist or sexist, and we don't use our voices in that moment. We're not as effective as we could be to stand up. We have wonderful traits. We're faithful people. But like Abraham, in that moment, we don't stand up. And so I think in this tale, we see a caution for those moments when we feel our voice caught within us, that we can release it. We can stand up for what's right, that we can stand up for each other. And then in Hagar, the person with the least power in the story. And yet ultimately, she is able to sort of roll with how things unfold and survives both Sarah's jealousy and Abraham's weaknesses. And I think it's because of her trust that a different path can still be okay. God appears to her twice and offers her a different path. Go back to the household, even though they just threw you out. Or stay here in the wilderness and trust that I will provide for you. And both times, Hagar puts her faith in God and trusts that a different path, not the one she intended, not the one she would have chosen, a different path can still be okay. And how many times in our lives do we think things are going one way and everything changes? The new path that is presented to us is not always easy. It's not always what we want. And sometimes we would do anything to be able to just keep traveling the path that we wanted, the one we chose. I would guess that Hagar would have been very happy to stay in the house the first time and continue on the path that she was on before the conflict, before the jealousy, before everything changed. But in Hagar, we see that sometimes when those life moments present themselves, a new path can be okay. It's what we do with it. It's how we live into it. It's who we trust to help us and support us. It's who we care for along the way and who we allow to care for us. It's allowing ourselves to be cared for when we need it. God appeared to Hagar in the wilderness and presented her with what she most needed at that moment, and it was water. Who are the people who appear in our difficult moments, who could offer us what we most need? How can we allow ourselves to accept that help when we need it? How can we be the ones to offer it when it is needed?